All right, good morning, afternoon, or evening. We have a global panel and we probably have a global audience. So, wherever you're at, thank you for watching. Today we have friend of the show, returning special guest, Dust James, who, as you can see, is hard at work. Thank you, Dust, for joining us. Really appreciate it. We're going to start talking some fun things shortly. We got Bintoth in Hungary, Ian Kummer live from Moscow suburbs, the suburbs of Moscow. Carlo Porcelli in Belly of the Beast, DC, Washington, DC. So thank you guys all for joining us. We were going to talk about our title, which is a decade after Euromaidan. So was today like an anniversary, Ben? Is that correct? Today's like a 10-year anniversary?
Well, yeah, the Ukrops, Goncharenko, the Nazi, and a lot of these people are celebrating. Ursula von der Leyen put up like an image to the Heroic 100 or something like that, never mentioning the children in the Donbass or anything like that. But, it's rebranded on Wikipedia to the Revolution of Dignity, That's what they call it now. And, it's coming at a significant turning point when the world is in a pretty big panic, I think, about Avdiivka. So that's where the title comes from. But I just know that I think Dust and Carlo especially want to talk some Trump and American civil war and revolution. So anybody want to take whatever?
Well,
topic?
Dust and Carlo, of course, big MAGA enthusiasts.
Yes.
So, but before...
Please don't say that. Don't even joke like that.
It was a bad joke.
Bad joke. It is not true. Let's before we get there, let's just talk about the 10-year anniversary. I mean, how well did things turn out? They were really hoping, let's have a coup in Ukraine. It'll only lead to good things, right? These idiots in charge of foreign policy, they're learning the hard way that coups have consequences. And I think we really need to just, hit that home a little bit. There was no need to overthrow the Yanukovych government. There was no need to prop up, their right-wing ultra-nationalist government that was virulently anti-Russian, that started repressing the Russians, the ethnic Russians in Ukraine. None of that was necessary, but they did it anyway because they thought it would help them. And, 10 years later, we have 500,000 Ukrainians dead. Europe is an economic mess. Russia is, has an economy firing on all 6 cylinders.
Performing better than all the G7.
Yeah. So, you guys have thoughts on that? Do you get angry at the waste of life and the callous disregard for humanity that is exhibited by Western imperialism?
I can tell you what's left of Ukraine is getting angry. Obviously, he's kind of a plant and, the clown who can say anything. But I saw a recent Alexei Aristovich interview where he claimed he's Russian, he's on the side of truth. But what he said was in 6 months' time, everybody in Ukraine will spit at the sight of a European or an American. They really are beginning to. I've seen some frontline chicks. Obviously, they're bringing girls now to conscription, who's saying, "Why are we here? It's not for the needs of Ukraine. It's for the needs of Zelensky and some oligarchs." And they're really, really fed up and pissed at their supposed allies, not at Russia. So I can tell you they're very angry. And something I wish I would have clipped or brought up earlier. I saw this article with nice illustrations was what the promise was, where when you integrate into Europe, you're going to have these vacations in Paris. You're going to have these really high paying jobs. Everything is going to be stable. It's going to be less corruption and all that. And just the anger that looking at that after 10 years, it's the same promise they made to Hungary and none of it happened. But yeah, they feel, I think, rightly so, that they've been taken for a ride by the US and the EU. But the 20 to 40-year-old, demographic is gone.
I have to go drop some paperwork off right quick, and I just wanted to respond. I somewhat disagree with the framing of it. I don't think the imperialists, led by the U.S. imperialists, cared if Ukrainian lives were lost. I don't care if they. I don't think they care if they win so-called win the war, I think they accomplished their goals. They extorted money to. I think the smaller goal, extort money to the military-industrial complex, but the larger goal, make sure Ukraine doesn't develop, keep Ukraine away from helping Russia, use Ukraine to attack Russia, and then basically cause as much damage to Russia
As possible.
as possible. They accomplish their goals. So
Oh, that's a good
I mean,
point.
Yeah.
I would add to
point.
that. I mean,
Yeah.
a further goal was to, alienate Russia from Europe. In that economic,
Especially
relationship
Germany.
they
Yeah.
had. So no, that's exactly right, Dust. I definitely agree with that. So yeah, take care of business. We will be here upon your return.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also weaken the European Union and make what's left of Ukraine a wholly owned subsidiary of Monsanto and the other major
BlackRock
US and some European corporations. Those are a couple of things you could throw into the mix.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't feel much sympathy for the Ukrainian people that bought the Western line, because in 2004, when Yanukovych was first overthrown, in the first
Orange, right?
it
That's
was a
the
more legalistic coup, but it was a coup. I was in contact with them because I had a blog, and they were just the people who were responding were just blindly materialistic. That's
Oh, yeah.
all I have to say. And they saw the materialism of the West as being what they wanted and what they sought. And I've been reading a book on the origins of the Renaissance out of the Middle Ages, what constituted that, and I came across an interesting notion about piety and poverty, and there was what's missing from all this materialism is that there's a certain ethical dimension that these people lacked, that they were just blind to, and my sympathy evaporated in 2004 for these people, and I we like I like to use the word ninnies for Americans, but the Ukrainians are just enormous, mind-boggling ninnies. They're just they to lose that many people and still persist at anything is and to not realize they were duped at this point it's staggering. It really rivals the American public as being stupid and victimized. On one hand, victimized currently by Russiagate and MAGA on the other side. So it's like it's I don't. The
We'll
general
transition to there later, but
wow.
really
Let
needs
me-
a course in ethics or
Ian,
morality.
you had a comment.
Well, who here can guess when was the first military partnership agreement? Who here can guess it? When was the first military partnership agreement between Ukraine and the USA?
I'm gonna say 1990s. I'm gonna say earlier than any revolution. What's the truth?
Anyone? Any other guesses?
I would guess when they put in that Timoshenko lady, that was one of the color revolutions.
Well, it was well, Ben is right. It was 1993.
Holy shit!
1993.
I didn't know,
So-
by the way. I just guessed.
Well, it was a good instinct because my point is in 2004, this had already been going on for 10 years. The propaganda in a lesser form than it is now. It's only escalated since there, but it had already been going for 10 years. So it was easy to say, because that was the promise to former Soviet states that, everybody can be like France, everybody can be affluent like France, your lives will be better. There won't be any shortages, there won't be anything bad, and when that happens in 2004, I guess at that point it'd be easy to say, well, that's because Russia is holding you back. And that's been the narrative that's kept even, 30 years after Soviet Union's gone, that story still works on them. So as far as propaganda goes, I incline, I agree with him, but he's not here. But I do agree with what Dust said about using Ukraine. And I don't know how well sourced this is, but it was all over Ukrainian social media in the last few days. There's this graphic claiming what the state of the male population is between the ages of 25 and 60. So allegedly there's a little over 11 million men still left in Ukraine. It's about 11 or 13% in military service now. There's a breakdown of it. And basically, long story short, they have around 950,000 men who are not employed in the civilian sector and not in the military and not disabled. And that's all age brackets between 60 and 25. So that's not good. 950,000, because there's a lot of speculation. Yeah. And that's not good. I mean, that doesn't sound like another 2 years worth of fighting. I think I don't think we're in the home stretch of the conflict. I do think we're going to drag this out past the U.S. presidential elections, but I think there's probably another year or so of fight left in it. But then it's really going to be gone after that.
Yeah, I still think it's decided. But to quickly amplify Carlo's point, I think last year, and I forgot, but some Verkhovna Rada, like committee head said they're stealing like there's no tomorrow. So yeah, there's that deep greed and corruption that made all this possible. But I'd still differentiate just regular old babushkas and dedushkas from this absolutely horrific leadership. And yeah, you're right. Did anybody catch? He's in the center of attention now, Mr. Lindsey Graham. He did a couple of things. One was he wanted to put Russia on the sponsors of terrorist list, and now he's on the Russian sort of list of terrorists and what do you call them, extremists on the registry, which is great. And the second thing, he voiced that maybe what we should do to pass this aid bill is switch from aid to basically a loan because, and I quote, Ukraine has a lot of minerals, I mean, it's exactly the same. It's reflected on both sides, this material greed. I just wanted to mention that.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's greedy. I mean, it is, but I mean, it's a tactic because right now that bill is struggling to get anywhere. It's probably going to continue to.
It's a way to convince the.
So yes, it's dodging that. We're not. And there's I don't know what the mechanics he's thinking of behind it, but maybe that is what will get it through the vote is making it a loan. Even though I think everyone knows pretty darn well at this point that no one's ever going to see that money again. Anything that goes into Ukraine is just gone. It's not going to be paid back. Loans are useless. I mean.
But he said this about all three of the U.S. allies. So that means Israel and Taiwan also get loans instead of aid. So it was the full package. Dust is back.
It sounds like the IMF, World Bank, structural adjustment loans.
Yeah,
it
does.
If you fail to pay us back, you can't pay us back. We take some of your assets. That's the way it works.
What can we suck out?
Right. I just wanted to make two brief points. First of all, as Doug Valentine has pointed out, and eloquently with much facts behind it, is that the CIA has been in Ukraine since the end of World War II, and since their inception, basically. And secondly, what was my second point? Oh, right. And they had apparently, according to Zelensky, they have 850,000 people under arms. So, but most of them are like subpar for military service, or a lot of them, according to Douglas McGregor and Scott Ritter and people like that. So,
yeah, and yet they fled out of Avdiivka, apparently not even following orders, even though some remained behind lines, and now they're plugging holes because apparently Russia is attacking on 5 points. I mean, that's the latest from the West admitting this stuff. So interesting.
And that was the Azov that left.
The third mechanized, the highest tech, very motivated, reconstituted Azov, who got blasted to hell at a training ground.
Yeah, right. They fled. So it's interesting.
So between Adivka falling and Putin's biggest political opponent being assassinated, does that increase the likelihood that Putin will win this election?
Well, we don't. I wouldn't go so far as to say we know for a fact. He who must not be named was assassinated.
No, I know.
But he was a non-entity. I mean, that's the most. I mean, let's be honest. That's the most publicity he's had since he was arrested when he came back.
And they called him, what do you call it? Corruption fighter, freedom fighter. The main opposition. I really thought the main opposition in Russia was Gennady Zyuganov and the Communist Party, but that's just me. What is the maximum he got? Like 2%? He really is a non-entity in Russia. But man, have they picked this up like an archangel for good in the world.
More like 4%. And when he was whatever, 2%, 4%. But when he was anti-corruption was when Soviet Union was collapsing and Russia was really corrupt. And that's when I was there, and I saw it. And that was back in the 80s and 90s. It was before Putin came on the scene. It was bad. We went to a restaurant and they had no meat on the menu. All we got was like a salad of tomatoes and some greens and stuff. It was. And
you actually saw the 90s in Russia, which I know a lot of horror stories, but I never experienced. You were there.
Yeah, so it was. So, and that's when he was anti-corruption, and those oligarchs either they bowed to pressure from Putin to keep the domestic population in mind when they did their business, or they got the fuck out of the country, and that's the big difference. So at one
when
point,
Bill Browder's
the big thing about that he was an anti-corruption guy, but he certainly didn't give the nuance of when he was an anti-corruption guy before he went to Yale and before he was bought off.
Well, Navalny was
go ahead.
himself was quite corrupt. Navalny himself was caught up in multiple corruption scandals even before he was a big figure, savior figure in the West. He was him and his family members were multiple corruption scandals involving him personally.
And
that's why Navalny could barely hide her enthusiasm here at the Munich Security Conference, because it's her time to earn some euros and some US dollars, some greenbacks. It really was so amazing. I didn't see any grief in that girl.
Wasn't his secretary or his right-hand person caught on videotape, demanding a certain amount of, in the tens of millions of dollars in order to facilitate a color revolution against Putin? Is that an accurate?
I don't know, but that was definitely the goal with Navalny after the West embraced him.
Because I thought that was one of the reasons he ended up being convicted was, his organization was caught on camera asking, a CIA or State Department person, given a money number, you give us this much and we'll go ahead and initiate a color revolution.
I don't think there's any quite smoking gun tying him to Western involvement quite that bad.
I've seen it on Telegram, but I know better than to trust Telegram. So
but I would say, but to answer the question, I mean, we know why he was dead for the same reason as these folks in Ukraine too, because he's a very right-wing nationalist figure, and that's the type of people you want for those types. Someone who's a very populist, very nationalist guy. Or not even nationalist, neo-nationalist type guy that you can get to overthrow your weak and effectual liberal government, replace it with a go-getter who cares about the people, who cares about making the country great again. It's that Navalny, that's probably why Navalny was, because he was very much into that, very right-wing, anti-immigration, anti-minorities crowds in the early 2000s. So that's probably what would put him on the radar screen as a good candidate to be banned.
Yeah, and I just
This
want to address the person.
I don't know.
that-
This might set dust off if he's listening, but Brother Cornel West didn't waste any time to embrace Brother Navalny, along with some black heroes. And some of the best response, I think, in the world is Brother Navalny saw brother Muslims as brother cockroaches.
Yes.
Do go ahead, brother. I thought that was worth showing.
I just wanted to also address what one of our viewers said about Navalny only being 47 and not capable. Well, the corruption that I saw, it went on for years, and it wasn't immediately eliminated from Russian society. So that was really the corruption he was addressing, and why he became anti-Putin in that regard really speaks more to his continued and invigorated connection to the West than to anything else. So I just wanted to point that out. It wasn't like Putin eliminated the corruption overnight, but that corruption that was festered under
2 decades of work.
under Gorbachev and Yeltsin was manifest even during the Putin's early years. But Putin did make an effort to eliminate it, and he certainly improved the lot of the average Russian person.
Hey, Shaniqua.
So I mean, that Cornel West thing. Like, I don't know what's wrong with him. Like, I mean, shouldn't he know better? Like, I mean, he's supposed to be really smart. He's supposed to, have love in his heart. Why would he have such a bad take on fucking Navalny? Like, that's
I'm done with Western so-called
No,
leftist,
it's
so-called
awful.
academics.
It's the Christianity. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Maybe.
to interrupt you. Go
I'm
ahead.
just wondering, is there a way to mute Dust while he's working on something?
I tried. I tried to hit the little mute button and it wouldn't go for me. So
That's what that was. I couldn't figure.
Yeah, he was ratcheting his load down on his semi.
Yeah, it's
I
working
have
on
an
something.
anecdote about brother.
Brother
West.
Cornell. Yeah.
Yeah, he taught at a seminary in New York, and a person I know, a young man, went up to that seminary, and became friends with Cornel West, and his father, this young man's father, was left Russia because of he felt religious oppression for the religion being Seventh-day Adventist, which I don't have any great affection for, and he was very high up in the Adventist construct, or whatever you want to call it, and he's been publishing anti-Russian propaganda for years. So West is in this environment in the seminary where he's surrounded by people who take
The expats.
who have these
from Russia.
odd religious beliefs, and he has odd religious beliefs as far as I'm concerned, because I consider any religious belief to be odd, especially because I don't want to get too far off here. We have two apocalypses. If they're looking for eschatology, religion's looking in the wrong place, because it's nuclear weapons and it's global climate change. And now we have a third one coming on, and that's strong artificial intelligence. So all of those are scientifically based. They're not religiously based. So religion is just so, so unimportant. And so, for West to consider anything in a Christian context, for me, is silly. It's naive. So I don't really put much stock in a lot of the things he says. So,
Dust, any opinions on Cornel West equating Navalny to some of the heroes of the Black liberation struggle?
Yeah, I mean he's an academic. He's from that. He was involved. He worked with some of the great fighters in the '70s and with the Panthers and others. Has been around that, but I think he's been in academia and he's held a position in academia for so long that he kind of absorbs some of it, and it's rather unfortunate. I think we need, as I always say, we need to build more working class and oppressed institutions to keep these figures of ours in line, to keep them rooted in the rooted in the struggle. But I think even with his misgivings, he's overall still an ally on a variety of other fronts. But it is somewhat disappointing when you see people corrupted by these institutions, ultimately run by our enemies. And even he was denied tenure. He goes along with to get along so much, and he still was repressed within that institution. So
Yeah. I mean, he listed Navalny at the same level as Leonard Peltier, Mumia Abu Jamal. That was just unreal to me when I saw that.
No,
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like I always say, like, nobody gets everything right except for myself, and everybody's a mixed bag. Everybody, like, he's great. Cornel West is pretty good on Palestine, and he has been for a long time. It's unfortunate, but it's like there's so many different issues, but that was just a really bad take. I mean, fucking Navalny with those people, Peltier, Jamal, and all the others. Like, that's crazy. Like, who are you trying to please with that? I mean, are you really trying to please your corporate overlords to get tenure, to get more FaceTime on MSNBC? Like, it's just sad. But so where do we want to go now? We haven't really talked Israel Palestine.
Do you want to hit Ukraine since we're on
Yes.
Navalny?
Yeah. Do you have some?
Do you want to take it away on Ukraine, the current situation?
Sure. Yeah. So, I think, and I do want to bring up, because this was a point we brought up in the last show, and it's been a lot of talk about in the news and social media, is the impact of this latest U.S. spending bill being delayed, particularly since the Euro spending bill is also delayed, and that's 50 billion euros over 4 years, which is nothing. And some people, and some experts, which I like, kind of raised the points that I was thinking too, was that it doesn't mean Ukraine is completely cut off. That's a false picture. That's not a true statement. These pipelines are still, they're still getting a trickle, because that's military. That's military gear. That's military equipment, shells. There's still a trickle. You can take, because there's discretionary there's all these, if you look at the military budget, even just for the USA by itself, there's all these little discretionary budgets, and there's ammunition. You can load some shells on pallets to send them to Ukraine. There's nothing preventing them from doing.
Denmark is sending all that they got. The Czechs
Yes.
somehow found 800,000 rounds. If the price is right, if the financing comes in that they can send, so they find these little stockpiles.
So they're not. So there's this picture of Ukraine just being completely out of ammo, and the Russian bear, just the orc horde about to overrun them. That's the picture that's being painted, even in the media right now. And it's not really completely. It's serious not getting that funding. It's very bad for soldiers' pay. It's very bad for the economy. It's bad, just all around. But it's not like they're just cut off. It's not a true statement. So I think that's important for people breathlessly waiting for a collapse. I don't think that collapse is imminent, like some people think. And I think so. It's kind of a false perception based on that funding. Yes.
If you're talking about the cheat sheet, that was just the title. It's kind of,
No, I'm not
you're
talking
right,
about.
you're right.
No. I'm talking in general, because that's been all over social media, and people speculating about it, and just the hysterical news coverage too, especially after Avdiivka fell. It was.
Yeah, I think Putin himself and Medvedev, who is in Chechnya now, both said that they still have military capabilities. Don't get too cocky. It was a good military victory, even London and the US acknowledge that. Somehow the EU is playing down Avdiivka like hell. But even they acknowledge that, but don't get too cocky. There's still a lot of potential left. Sorry, Carlo.
One of the most disgusting pieces of propaganda in the West, and especially in the U.S., is this notion that the Congress holding up the aid to Ukraine was somehow responsible for the fall of Avdiivka, when that stuff isn't going to get there for months, if not years.
Yeah, but they locked it together. So did Biden himself.
That's disgusting. That's just a out and out fraud on the American ninnyhood. On American ninnyhood. It's
I like that he's the most holidaying president. I think he went back to Delaware again, and he was upset that it's another 2 weeks. Another 2 weeks that the House can't pass this aid.
Oh God. Well,
Do you think it's going to get passed once they reconvene? Is that likely, or is it likely that they're going to cut their losses?
Well, I mean, everybody's like the conventional wisdom is that's going to get passed, and that's what I mean. I feel like a broken record because I was saying that in December, and I almost feel a little foolish now saying that for 3 months. But the main thing is that there's nothing about. Oh my gosh, can we mute that? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
There is nothing about the border in there. That's the bartering chip that Republicans want because they don't care about Ukraine. They're very upfront about that.
Of course not. They want to get something out of it.
They want to get something out of it. And Biden's tried. So Biden gave them that. I mean, let's be honest. That immigration bill had nothing that Republicans wanted in it. If you actually look at what the bill said. And so that just got tossed. They're not even talking about immigration in this new bill, but it's just like what is the incentive for Republicans to vote for this new bill for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel? There's nothing in it for them. So that's the unresolved question. And that question has to get answered before it gets approved. And I'm not sure Biden has an answer. I'm not sure anyone in that building has an answer to what will make Republicans happy so they support this bill. It's kind of amazing that they still don't. Months later, they still don't have.
So because of that, you're not sure the conventional wisdom that it will get passed in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
True. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Just a quick observation that there's always horse trading in the background, which has been obvious now in Europe, because I just saw in Hungarian news that in order for us to mint Sweden's accession into NATO, we are basically on the verge of a big military deal. We have like 18 Gripens, which is the Swedish multi-role fighter jet, and we want another 18 of the latest one. We want some like shoulder-launched missile. We want some weapon systems. That's basically it. That's what you got to give us to get in. And the Republicans are playing the same game. What do we get out of this if we give you this money pool? Go ahead, Dust.
I wanted to comment on the relations between the militarization of the border and the funding of the Nazis in Ukraine to attack Russia. And they're both imperialist positions. So the more fascist-leaning ones want to attack oppressed workers here, our undocumented co-workers here, and the more I guess strategic capitalists, they're like, oh, we need to attack the Russians. So the controlled opposition imperialists were like, hey, give us money to kill immigrants, to kill refugees, and then you can get your money to kill the Russians. So I mean, it's very.
Don't forget, there's also China. There's that group that wants to pivot.
Yeah. So it's like, so it makes sense. These fights. I don't think the Republicans are any more on the side of the working class and the oppressed. They just have a different target that satisfies the reactionary leaning base that they're trying to appeal to, and they're trying to make an issue that isn't an issue more of an issue because they also don't do anything for the people. And actually in the South, Republicans help maintain national oppression in the South. And the reason why the South is poor and has less resources than a lot of the rest of the country is because of these harsh draconian austerity policies by the Republicans that control the South.
And don't forget, you said you're turning a non-issue into an issue. I mean, they also need this relatively cheap labor to undermine everybody else's. It's perfectly in line with, I think, big capitalists in both parties' agenda to have.
I mean, what caused the flood of immigration was the imperialist policies.
Yeah,
that's what caused
raping
it.
their
And
countries.
and you can't really stop that. Without addressing that. And if you do try to stop that, all you're going to do is cause more deaths in the desert. So, I mean, I wouldn't be in favor of it whatsoever. But, I mean, regardless of what party and what they say, both are harsh. The Republicans and the Democrats, I would say, equally repress and attack migrants, regardless of the so-called drama and debate.
At least I find some symmetry, because Europe and Africa, pretty much the same story as what you described with South America and the US. Sorry, go ahead, Carlo.
No, it's the obvious thing that as long as American foreign policy is destructive toward everyone, really. I mean, even you can cite obvious ones like Nicaragua and Venezuela and Cuba, but by the same token, the policies of U.S. policy in Guatemala, El Salvador, anywhere you mentioned in the South have always been repressive, and that drives people out of countries.
Well, get ready for Argentina. It's looking pretty terrible at this moment.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is that they've taken the bills, they've taken the part of the bill that has immigration, and they've cut it away from the appropriations for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine. And but I think that the bill may not pass before anytime soon, because I think that too has been seen by the MAGA Republicans as a wedge to drive between Biden and the voters, because Ukraine is basically lost, and there's an isolationist pattern forming, a very libertarian based, or context wise, isolationist element brewing in the MAGA people.
Yeah, that's what's got Europe's Atlanticists terrified, by the way.
Yeah, and well, they should be, because I think Trump might win the election. I think it's a very good chance.
I think so too. You guys want to get into U.S. election?
Yeah, I think it's likely, because the grassroots just stuffing the ballot boxes that got Biden in last time isn't going to work if there's too large a margin. And I think it's going to be hard to get away with that a second time if he's too unpopular. I think this sunk him. I think Gaza is sinking him. Just in general, he's I don't know what's going to happen with the election. It's going to be, it's scary to even make a prediction about it. I do think it's true. I do think it's true that they're nervous about it, and what you brought up in our last podcast, how they're baby proofing everything, so he can't. Yeah. So it's like you have a baby in the house, you're gonna have a toddler in the house next weekend, so you just baby proof everything so you can't wreck it. That's what they're doing for the White House when expecting Trump to come in there. He can't get out of NATO. He can't do this. He can't do that. You see that. So
do you want me to prime this conversation with two junk news, both of which I found in Europe? One is the Daily Mail, Boris Johnson's favorite tabloid, and the second is Stern, which is Star, a German magazine. The second one had a front page. The first one had a write-up, and both of them said, introducing Madam President of the United States, and it was Michelle Obama. These, like, on the fucking front page. It was like, what? Why from here? Why is this coming from little European tabloids? But it was interesting. I have no idea. I can't speculate, but I'm surrounded by four Americans. So.
Tucker Carlson, of all people, has speculated. I mean, a lot of people have speculated on, Michelle Obama is like the next Democrats pick. I mean, maybe I don't see any kind of build up to that. I mean, Like with Hillary, it was known for years and years and years that Hillary Clinton wanted to be president. That was not a secret in American politics for a very long time. I don't see. You'd think there'd be some indication before now that Michelle Obama even wants to be president. I'm not seeing it. But it's not. Speculation is not new, but I just don't see.
They would really have to talk her into it. She'd really have to be talked into it because I don't think she's interested.
She's not like a big career politician like Hillary Clinton was. She's already the wife of former presidents. They're already got all the perks of being a former president. There's no. I don't see it. I'm not.
Oh fuck! Hillary was here in Munich, but forget it. Yeah. So you guys know a lot more. I know there was a fraud case against Trump, which he just paid the bail. I know he's selling golden sneakers, and that's pretty much all I paid attention to when it comes to US.
What I would be interested to hear from everybody is what you think of NATO, because Trump has been saying that for years. You know, we need to hold these guys, and actually, there are treaties on the books. They are supposed to meet that 2% threshold for defense spending. And Lindsey Graham might be, I mean, maybe he's not the first, but he's the first besides Trump I've heard of actually saying, you know, hold them, you know, don't just nag them. Don't just nag European partners to meet that spending, actually threaten to kick them out if they don't, which I thought
the same that should be done with Israel right now. Yes. I think it's healthy for us, which is why I unequivocally support Trump, because there's real terror in the leaders here in the Munich.
Here's the thing. Lindsey Graham is a mainstream. I mean, he's crazy, but he's a pretty mainstream guy. So even if he's saying it, I found that more. I mean, because Trump is Trump. He just says,
and it is a campaign. So even we can take it as just a campaign thing. But there was real concern in Europe.
Right. But my point is that if Lindsey Graham's saying it, there's a chance that the USA might just decide to do that, whether or not Trump wins. That might just be an idea that they have, because we need those Baltic midget states. We need Finland. We need Sweden, because Sweden's that long time ally of the rule. Even before 1945, they were that long time ally of the rules-based world order. There's certain countries we need. You know, France, Germany, Spain, Italy. Do we really need them in NATO? There might be some culling of the herd, because, you know, if NATO is just a wedge against Russia, do you really need all of that? All those extra members that
I think they want as big of a coalition as possible, and if they get kicked out of NATO, they're going to run straight to Russia and China. I don't think they want that.
I don't think Spain and France and Germany are going to run to Russia.
Oh, you're talking about those?
I'm just talking about culling members that don't, because here's the thing: all those neighboring regions next to Russia, they meet the spending limits. If you look at the map, it's those Western countries that don't. The UK does, the Baltic states do, Hungary does.
Quick observation, and this comes from Pepe Escobar, huge respect to that guy, that he said they never forgot that in 2003, the coalition to attack, which one was that, Iraq, Afghanistan, maybe, Middle East, was basically a bad idea by Russia, so saying not supported by Russia, by France, and by Germany at the time. Never forgot that. And Pepe puts it this way, that this axis between, you know, Berlin and Paris is shifting east, and he calls it the London, Warsaw, Vilnius, Kiev axis. Those are the important players in NATO.
Yes.
But, you know, Germany is still occupied. It's got the most bases, the most US personnel in all of Europe. But there is definitely this dynamic, I think, when it comes to US, of prioritizing the new Eastern mad people.
It goes back back to the 1930s, maybe earlier than that. Actually, no, early 19th century. Even during the Great Game, you know, pitting those Central European countries as a wedge.
That's good.
New Europe.
Yeah. Against the Austro-Hungarian Empire and against Russia. Those little central states were very useful for that, sparking rebellions and sparking trouble there.
Yeah. The deep state is not going to let Trump pull out of NATO, and this is a guy that's selling bobbleheads. He's a joke to the Central Intelligence Agency. They don't care if he's president or not, but he's not going to pull out of NATO because he's going. You know, that's going to affect the American economy.
It's foundational to
military
US
industrial complex and the sales of arms dramatically, especially now that Europe is depleted and weakened at the same time, which was part of the plan. They'll be convinced to spend all kinds of money and to put up all kinds of assets as collateral, just like so. Trump
And that's
is
just
not gonna
defense.
be able
Don't
to
forget,
do
there's
that.
also energy. Now
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
reliant on the US.
Right, at 4 times or 5 times the price they could have had it through the Nord Stream pipeline.
I
Which
think
was-
that's wrong. I think it's 4 times the price that you buy it in the US, but it's about 7 or 8 times that they would
Oh.
have got through the cheap pipeline. That's how bad it is.
Let's talk about whether or not they're concerned about Trump, because you know you can make an argument for both cases. You can make the case that you know they don't really like they'll manage him okay and they're not too concerned. But on the other hand, you can make the case that they're apoplectic and they're doing everything they can, you know, with lawfare and things like that to keep him from winning. So, like, what's going on with that? Why? Where does reality fall? I mean, is it different factions have different, you know, positions towards Trump? Some are kind of like, oh, they don't really care, but others are adamant that he can't, you know, he can't get in. Like, why can we make a good argument for both positions?
I'll
Well,
leave this
DeSantis
to the Americans. Go ahead, Ian.
DeSantis, you know, I think has left himself open for a VP nomination for Trump.
Could
I don't
be.
think Nikki Haley is going to. I think there's a faction still supporting Nikki Haley, but she's not going to make it.
She's nothing. She's not going to happen.
She's just there to. I mean, I think she's very much a centrist candidate where they know that because in this system you want to resolve your primaries as soon as possible and start your campaign for the general election. The longer she gets dragged along, kicking and screaming, even when she knows she has no chance of winning. Theoretically, she hurts Trump because he's focused on winning the primary, not the general election. I think that's the theory with her.
Okay.
But I think more and more mainstream Republicans are just like, you know what? We might not like Trump, but we don't want to sink our own party. We're not going to fall on our swords to oppose Trump. And I think that eventually became a choice because, you know, if Republicans just actually adamantly opposed Trump, they would alienate their base. It would just not be a survivable mistake for the Republican Party to
Do
make.
they have a strategy in mind that we haven't seen yet to keep Trump out of the White House, or do you think they're?
I think a lot of people. I mean, because
if
if DeSantis is just like, I think I mean, he's a pretty young guy. He's the governor of Florida. He's just like, you know what? I can be vice president for Trump. I can do that 4 years, 4 years. And then I can run for president. I think from his point of view, and for a lot of mainstream Republicans' view, it's like we can tolerate Trump for 4 years and then do what we want.
Well, let's not forget that they threw all the lawfare they could find at Trump. I mean, this is Fox News. Take it with a pinch of Murdoch, you know. But they ran this headline that Trump will be the first political prisoner in the U.S. Big, scary, wary U.S. gulags stuff. But they did throw a lot at him, and he is popular. This is for you because you're a trucker, and one of the headlines I saw, and this was New York Post, so not Murdoch Media, but Trump supporting truckers vow to boycott and shut New York City down after 355 million fraud ruling. So a base is certainly there, and they're definitely trying to, I think, stop the wrecking ball. What did I call him? The chaos bomb from entering the White House again. He's just too much of a liability. But
well, you have to take
challenge.
into account gender and race. Trump is on trial. The 2 DAs that really are going after him are both African American women, and his other court case, the other court case, or one of them, is for harassing women. I mean, the porn star. She took.
Stormy! I almost forgot Stormy Daniels.
Stormy.
So it's and I think that demonstrates that really, even though you can see wall-to-wall news on CNBC or whatever you want to, or CNN about Trump's trials and all this, it's really soft. It's not as hard as the deep state can go. Believe me. Ask the Kennedy family. You know, so they're taking a soft approach, and they want to see if it'll work, and it's not working. It's just driving more people to Trump.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I had other things I wanted to add to that, but I can't think what they are now. So I'm going to hand it over.
I can go ahead and respond.
Go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah. I think the idea that Trump is anything other than completely controlled opposition is absolutely ridiculous.
I know we disagree there, but make your case.
I mean, okay, so just look at what they did to Fred Hampton. They killed him in his bed. Look what they're doing to the Uhuru movement. The Uhuru movement had an ambassador from Russia on a stream, and they got FBI charges against them. I mean, if the powers that be wanted to kill Trump, he would be dead. I think they want Trump to be a popular figure, and I think they might even want him to win the election. The idea that he would do anything like take the U.S. out of NATO is also absolutely ridiculous. Because if you look when he was in power, if you look at the impeachment, so he wanted to use Ukraine aid to Nazis as a bargaining chip to expose his political allies. The Biden family was absolutely corrupt and involved. And the second he tried to do something, they impeached him. And what did Trump do? He raised the amount of money going to Ukraine, escalated the tension, and part of Trump's actions of further giving money to Ukraine is part of the escalation that unfolded under Biden. The idea there would be any mismatch in foreign policy if Trump got into power is a pipe dream. It's ridiculous. They want you to believe that because they want to associate the anti-war position with racism and anti-immigrant bigotry, which is just as equally harmful to our primary cause here to build independent power, which is organize the international proletariat in the United States.
Yeah, what
you mean? The American proletariat? Sorry.
No, the international proletariat in the United States. We are the prison house of nations. We get to discuss that later.
Okay, I was with you to a point, and I agree with 80% of what you just said. But Carlo already has things to say.
We can bring Steve Bannon into the discussion here.
You always
do. If anyone takes the time to listen to Steve Bannon's radio podcast, even though he has that ridiculous pillow salesman on Lindell, his message is constantly he tells his audience they're coming after you. Like now he uses it like they're coming after Trump, they'll come after you. They'll come after your money.
I've seen that.
It's incitement. It's what it all is. It's January 6th every fucking day on his channel. It's been January 6th. He has advertisement after advertisement. Buy gold. Buy these survival kits. It's like he's the big insider, and that's the element. Trump likes that element because it seems to give him power. So Bannon's got his ear, but I think Bannon ultimately is a joke. But if anything happens to Trump, like he's assassinated, there will be repercussions from these militia groups and so on and so forth. And innocent people will die because they'll kill minorities. They're probably already serial killers killing women all around the country. They're the idiots, and ultimately they want another Waco. There's too much fallout. So if you had 15 or 20 Wacos, then maybe Bannon's notion of the whole culture collapsing into his fascist arms will come to pass. Bannon considers himself far more important than Trump. Trump is his puppet. Trump is his tool for incitement. And that's an element that we have to consider. But by the same token, it's an element that when Regis pointed out that his son here in the U.S. Said there was going to be a second civil war, it'll be a short war because those fat fucks in the Michigan countryside doing maneuvers or whatever you want to call them, they'll be wiped out in a nanosecond by the deep state. Which, oh my God, they got all kinds of tools.
I think the way to answer my own question again was, how do we explain that we can give a good argument saying that they really don't want Trump, and we can also make a good argument saying that they don't really care if Trump gets elected or not. And I think we can explain that by saying that theys are different, right? So the ruling class is a collection of various interest groups with overlapping but also oppositional interests. And so, that kind of explains. There's not like a monolithic they. So they are kind of fractionalized and divided, and they have a lot of shared interests in common. I mean, they all are for, capitalism, imperialism, keeping the working class disenfranchised, but they're also, divided over strategies and over, who's gonna reap the huge profits with the next president that comes in, because a lot of it is money. So when the Democrats are in, certain corporations are the big, beneficiaries. When the Republicans are in, it's different corporations that are the big beneficiaries. And so it's kind of about money. So there is a real antagonism between the parties, but there's also an overlapping interest about, capitalism, imperialism, and keeping the working class subjugated and disenfranchised. So I don't know. I think obviously Trump is not their favorite, and if you take a poll of the establishment, he would not be there. But because of his, he's in good standing with a large portion of the electorate because of his anti-establishment rhetoric, and so his anti-establishment rhetoric has gotten him a lot of popularity. And so, the establishment is trying to deal with that and work with that and harness it for their own interests and make sure it isn't detrimental to their interests. And that's just kind of what we see being played out. I'm not really saying anything.
Well, I wanted to add, oh, fucking hell. Now I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. Carlo already had a thought. Shit.
No, I just wanted to congratulate Billy Bob. That was very nice. That was a good contextual.
It was.
Piece.
Oh yes.
And let me address it a little bit. I think that this hostility toward Trump is part of the he doesn't I don't want to use the word pander, but to the general population, there's a kind of feel good aspect to American ninnies about being progressive. That is, incorporating minorities into all contexts of life in America. Women being involved. I mean, it's and all of that. There's the kind of this is good propaganda for the rest of the world. And so that and Trump is much more. He's appealing to largely an evangelical audience who doesn't agree with that. The woman should have her place, even though
he's a patriarchal guy.
Yeah, patriarchal guy. And I think that sounds a little soft in why they would go after him, but I don't think. Look at what's going to happen. You got the trials. He's never going to pay any of that money. He's been told to pay by the courts. He's never going to pay a cent. He's going to appeal till he dies. And the court case in South Carolina, the DA has been caught up in this affair she had with the lead lawyer who was going after Trump. So there's a conflict of interest that's taken over the conversation. Nobody's talking about the court cases brought against Trump and all the people who pretended that they were delegates to the South Carolina voting whatever you call it. So it's like
the state delegates.
Yeah, state delegates. He's that's gone out the window, and even CNN is, because they like to get ratings and it's sensational and it has sex involved, has covered this live. This African American woman had an affair with an African American lawyer who she appointed to be the head attorney in the case against Trump. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean,
Does
Linda
it look
Thomas.
like we have you
I have
for a
3
minute?
points. I have
Yeah.
3 major disagreements with Billy Bob's comments.
Okay.
I really like Carlos talking about how I don't think the Democrats care. I think the Democrats like that Trump enables the fascists to basically be gangs to basically enforce Democrat policies of national impression. Like I think the fascists and the Democrats go hand in hand. They like each other. So that's my big thing is the ruling class really that divided? And I would say no. If you look at the Democrat, like Hillary Clinton supported Trump's candidacy. She didn't actually care if he won. The Democratic Party has been backing the Trump movement everywhere it sprung up, and you can look at its actual campaign contributions. They like having a controlled opposition, and the reason why they like having a controlled opposition, was another disagreement I have with Billy Bob, is that Trump is not popular. Trump is hated by the vast majority of Americans. America is largely an urban society, by populations and number. And I'm in Trump country. And even within Trump country, the majority of people don't vote. And of those that do vote, still you'll have 40% of people in most rural areas still voting for Democrat. It's only in like the poorest areas. It's almost backwards, almost the most poorest, most controlled areas. And if you look at the high Republican areas, lots of money is going in there to skew and the actual views of the people in those positions. So I think they love having this figure that promotes the fascist gangs, that attack the oppressed communities, that they can win elections against without actually doing anything that helps the people. And
I would say those are complementary and not contradictory.
The last point I fully agree with.
what
I'm just
I'm
gonna
saying.
add-
I have
let me
one
add-
more point
go
about
go
the
ahead.
Civil War. I don't think these militia groups are that powerful. I think they could easily be put down by the U.S. military and the FBI if they wanted. But the FBI, I think at one point on a truck, basically stopped focusing on white supremacy and still hasn't really been focusing on. I think they're allowed to exist. These militias are ultimately working for the deep state. I think they're funded, supported, allowed to exist. And I don't think they could carry out a civil war if they want to. But what they could do is do a lot of damage to working class and oppressed people, which I think the deep state is really wants to happen. The other issue is I see the first Civil War actually as a revolution, as a Marxist, which is a whole putting down the slave owning aristocracy through the Revolutionary Coalition led by the Republicans. But that's back then. It's completely different now. But go ahead, guys.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned
I
that.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
respond because
I think
Oh,
Billy
yeah,
Bob
go ahead.
should
I
be
don't
able
disagree with anything Dust said, and I was trying to find where he was disagreeing with me, and I'm not sure I heard any disagreement. But if he wants to call that a disagreement, I'm okay with that. But I agree with everything Dust said. Okay, maybe not. I mean, so again, there's nuance, right? So Trump is a popular politician compared to other politicians, but Dust is absolutely right. Half the people don't freaking vote. And then, among the half that do vote, it's, he doesn't even have a majority of those on his side. So everything's relative. But I don't remember saying specifically that Trump, I said a lot of people, which, a lot is just more than two, really. Ian, go ahead.
Well, I've noticed immigration has come up a lot. Would y'all be interested to hear the Russian attitude towards immigrants? And I say this as a person in the immigration process for Russia. Might be interesting. So it was actually very interesting. So I've been working on it, I would say about, probably over 6 months now working on this process. And it's very interesting because if you come to Russia as a foreigner, everybody's very welcome, everybody's very polite. But when you actually start the process to, the immigration process, you're going through this checklist, you're doing all these medical appointments, doing all this, it's going through the bureaucracy. It's very interesting. You bring even people aren't in the immigration process. So you go to a hospital, I need my certificate signed, for example, people will look at you and they'll see where you're from and they'll be like, well, what is wrong? You're from the USA. What is wrong with the USA? What, and actually I have a friend who's from France and I told him that story. He said the same thing. Oh yeah, I'm from France. And I'll go and they'll be like, what is wrong with France? Why, so
well, it looks like Ukraine nowadays.
But. Well, it's kind of interesting. It's that, so I see a lot of people, both left wing and right wing, say this. Oh well, if shit hits the fan in the USA, you can just go to Russia. It's just like, no, you can't. You can't, because I can get away with it because there's just one of me. I mean, I think the number of Americans right now going through the immigration process in Russia, you could probably almost count with one hand, literally. If there's 1 million Americans all at once trying to get to Russia, they'd just be like, no. So it's kind of, I point that out because they're, and it's probably the same for China. It's probably the same for, where any other country you might want to go to. They're not pro-immigration, let's say.
I went through the same process in New Zealand. It was a very, very tough process. I can tell you that.
So this idea that, they're going to welcome the fellow proletariats from the USA or Western Europe, it's not true. They're not interested in, if you're a Russian, if you have a parent who's a former Soviet citizen, it doesn't even matter what part of the Soviet Union is. It's like, hey, and you want to go back to the motherlands in Russia. It's like, hey, my mom or my dad was a Soviet citizen. I want to go back to the motherlands. They'll fast track you. But if you're just a random guy in the USA, they'll just be like, you can try.
Probably engage in an extensive background check since you were, in the military and you're probably CIA.
Well, And my point is now it's doable, but if there's a mass shift of people trying to get out of the sinking ship, they're not going to open the border to us. I think.
Okay,
I'm getting.
How did that come up? Because was somebody suggesting?
We're talking about immigration, and we're talking about the proletariat. I don't think it's actually in our modern setting.
I would like to
Can
interject before the false parallels are made to the U.S. if possible.
All right. Go ahead, Dust. But then I'd really like to add something. Go ahead.
So, I think Russia has never been an imperialist power. Russia is not a settler nation founded on indigenous Holocaust and slavery. Russia did not steal 1/3 of its territory from any of its neighbors, and Russia does not have an oppressed nation within its borders that is from that has indigenous ancestry, both indigenous ancestry and ancestry back to Mexico, where the border essentially crossed that entire population of people. So the idea that, the U.S. has the right to enact borders and hold the borders I think that whole idea is illegitimate to begin with. And if we look at how immigration policy is actually done in the United States, it is nothing more than an excuse, similar to the 13th Amendment in the black population, just like the criminal justice system. The way the criminal justice system operates is people of all colors and classes commit drug offenses, but it's the black population, it's at the hardest, and the brown population to a similar extent that enables them to legally discriminate. Once they criminalize, they can legally discriminate. So let's look at the immigration law in the United States. They largely let the right wingers in. They let the Gusanos in. They let the right wing Venezuelans in. They let the Ukrainian fascists in. They largely allow white immigration to an extent. But the people that they stole all this land from, they keep out. And then you have this massive border, you're never gonna control it. Specifically, when you create the imperialist policies that force people here, and then they use this to keep largely indigenous population super exploited. If you look at the migration system, it is nothing more as an excuse to continually to super exploit, harass, and enact violence and against a largely indigenous population. So it's a completely different history and material reasoning for the U.S. immigration system versus Russia or China.
I mean, you're hard to disagree with. It really is difficult because you make a good point. But what I'd like to add, I think no one's brought it up, and I'm trying not to belittle the social, I guess, factor of the elections that you all talk about. You know, white supremacy, prison labor. You didn't even bring it up. A lot of that going on. But as Billy Bob said, a whole lot of big fortunes are in this race, and they are currently undergoing a multifaceted crisis around the world. You know, based on money printing, the petrodollar. Their military might has been shown to be a paper tiger both in Ukraine and now increasingly in the Middle East. Same goes for the Chinese, the interest in Taipei. And I think that's what moves politics a lot less than the social issues. And when in times of crisis, I didn't say Trump was a good guy. I know he killed Qasem Soleimani. I said he's a chaos bomb. And back to my point, they want to avoid a chaos bomb, especially at a time of crisis. That's all I wanted to add to that. So don't forget that the international capital is undergoing the biggest challenge it has since the Soviet Union. It really is.
Yeah.
And if we talk about immigration, I have one point on immigration. It's basically everybody is fine with the status quo. It's used as a political football by the two parties in a partisan way. But I don't think Republicans really care about ending immigration. And I think they're happy with the status quo because Dust brought up some of the benefits of the status quo, but it's also, you know, it lowers wages. It decreases the bargaining power of the U.S. working class. And, you know, it's useful. I mean, you know, the illegal immigrants keep the economy running. They don't want to end that. They really don't. So it's just used as a political football. They appeal to these nativist ideas of, you know, these aliens coming into our country and just for political purposes. But they're not really serious. They don't really care. It's a theater.
One more example, just to underline what you just said. There is a new bill, I think, in the Senate called Courage to Serve, which would expedite citizenship for immigrants who will enroll in the military. It's currently going through the rounds. Another use that you can see. But I wanted to add
basic training. We had other soldiers that didn't really speak English. I mean,
and
Ian.
I wanted to add that not all solutions come from the inside, because there's 3 places where Sergei Lavrov he's in the second leg of his journey. He went to Cuba first, right, to Havana. There's a new inaugurated beautiful, you know, most of the stuff that's public in the news, that's not the real agreements that you don't hear of. Then he went to Caracas, Venezuela, and next stop is Brazil. So there are other options now to stabilize, to create a prosperous society there, which, you know, is kind of a self-solving problem for the U.S. problems that are now currently being politicized in this election.
I wonder if we're going to see a huge influx of Argentinian migrants. I wonder how long before.
Right now, you might.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, you might.
What to just put an accent on what
60% is in poverty. I thought you wanted to say that.
50%. Yeah, half the population. To put it, Guaido now lives in a condo near Juan Guaido near Miami, and his next door neighbor is Yair Netanyahu.
Oh yeah, the kid.
Netanyahu's sons, who's not. There's an existential problem for Israel, but he's not going out there to do anything about it. And I want to point out to Dust that a title for the show that I sent too late was A Second American Civil War, Fact or Farce. And I think we've established that
Farce.
Probably farce. Yeah, it's farce.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can be convinced, you see.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. So where do you want to go now?
I wanted to address some concerns with Billy's comments, and I think it is correct that they're happy that people are poor. Well, I mean, they get two victories. They destroy Mexico and Latin America. They're able to keep the banks in power, and those people need loans. They're able to fund launder the money to the drug dealers by U.S. banks doing it. They're able to sell more weapons, and then they have people come in, a mass of people who are fleeing those horrible conditions, and that labor competes with labor here, and that does drive down wages to an extent. But I think as workers and socialists and communists in the United States, what are we going to do about it? And I would say we need to first of all, we don't need to call for more militarization on the border. We don't need to call for deportations, because these are only things that terrorize workers that have been here 20 plus years. There's an undocumented community that has been here since the 90s that's still undocumented and still working, who live in this ad. So I think the answer is to militantly defend. I would like to see Americans build militias and fight ICE to protect our undocumented coworkers. That, I think, is revolutionary. I think we should be organizing the undocumented workers. One of the leaders of Unite Here, which organized the domestic workers when I was building coalitions as a student activist, came to one of our meetings in the 2010s. I'm showing a little bit of when I was most active, and he came and said, I don't care if they got a green card as long as they got a union card, because we're going to get through this together. These are our fellow workers. And I think that's what needs to be said. And that is why Trump's rhetoric, Carlson's rhetoric, is so dangerous and damaging to the power we need to build as workers in this country alongside the undocumented workers.
I do have a question, though. So let's say we do get another 10, 15, 20 million voters. Are these new American citizens going to be Marxists, or are they going to further cement the system we already have?
Well, historically, Marxism is more popular in Latin America. I'm not, for the most part. I mean, I was partly raised in the immigrant community, and I would wear a Che shirt. And workers from southern Mexico were big fans of Che, and people in the United States either didn't know what it was or were hostile to it. So I think they do lean more progressive and socialist. But there are right wing immigrants. But the thing is, they're allowing the right wing immigrants in. Majority of the people that are fleeing and coming across the border undocumented are the poorest of the poor and do tend to be more left-wing progressive. And simply based on their class position in the United States, they have more revolutionary potential than the average U.S. citizen. If we look at 2006 May Day, which is a socialist holiday around the world, it was undocumented immigrants that returned May Day to its place of origin by having a revolt on 2006 on May Day.
I don't know. I think it's a mixed bag. Once again, I can only speak anecdotally, but a lot of Latinos around here are evangelicals, and they've been helped by American churches to get here, and they retain that evangelical religion. They're not Catholic anymore, and if they're far right, or right wing, let's say.
Therefore, Trump
because of their
material.
material well-being. I mean, they work like motherfuckers. They're hard workers. They have houses around me here in my neighborhood, so on and so forth, and they send money back to families. In my I don't want to get too anecdotal, but my brother-in-law, my son-in-law is a contractor, and he had three boys from El Salvador working for him, and they're just delighted that Bukele is now president, locking up all the MS-13, and they send money back to their families in El Salvador, and they've got families here. They're just wonderful people, but in their case, they're not involved in politics really in any way. They ask me about it. What do I think? And so I think there is, and the other thing is, MS-13, close in a place called Langley Park, which used to be basically private student housing. They've taken it over, and recently there was a gun battle, and they accidentally killed a 4-year-old, and they've killed a number of people around there, and there the power of MS-13 in this country kind of can't be minimized. They do terrorize.
I would like to make a quick clarification. So there's
Go
no
ahead.
confusion. Undocumented workers are less likely to commit crimes than U.S. citizens.
Yeah, I agree
So
with
I'm
that.
not saying like I think the crimes of undocumented migrants is overestimated and publicized by Fox News and the racist organizations, the Klan, to strum up hate against undocumented workers. But in reality, you're more likely to have a crime committed against you by a U.S. citizen. There is cases, but they're overblown and promoted for the purposes of supporting hate and division.
Yeah, it's just that I don't see them going left. Or
Yeah.
beyond voting Democrat.
Yeah.
And
So-
it's not it's and their business.
I don't know. I would
it's a
counter
new-
the vast majority are, even though there's I would say minority is right wing, and just like in the U.S., I mean the gangs are used by the capitalists to sell poisons to their own community. The same is true as Latin America. The same is true, but the vast majority of the black population, just the majority of the immigrant population, are working class and tend to support, and at least their material interest is to support left-wing positions.
Really,
I love that the U.S. launched the war on terror, and the two places that the war on drugs. The two places that take it seriously are China and Russia, where there's zero tolerance for this shit.
So as far as hostility towards immigrants, like I don't condone that. I don't think there should be any kind of hostility whatsoever to these poor people that are fleeing Western imperialism, trying to make a better life. So I just feel for them, and I want the best of them. I have no hostility at all. I think the solution, of course, is to end imperialism, putting in governments of, for, and by the people all throughout Central and South America and in the United States. And then we can have open borders, because we won't have an influx of migrants, because, everybody will have a great place to live. So that's the solution, and that's my advocacy. But no, I see it's used as a political football, and it's cynically exploited by both parties, for the interests of the wealthy elite. I mean, that's just the way it is.
And the last phrase that Dust used was this sort of divide and incur hatred. That is very visible in this.
Yeah.
By the way, I have to add that
contentious issue. Yeah.
People like Douglas McGregor, who have no clue about history before 1990s, they keep talking about this invasion and
that's
I definitely don't agree with him on that.
It's repulsive language. So what about Tucker Carlson? I read a long article on him this morning at Mint Press by Alan McLeod or something. It was pretty good, talking about his origins and his dad, being a propagandist for
Voice of America.
Voice of America.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he did some tours in Nicaragua during the height of the Contra, counter-revolutionary, the murderous things that Ollie North and Iran-Contra, all that stuff. He was visiting Nicaragua during that time. So he's a divisive, contentious person. But can we agree that it was good that he interviewed Putin, and that interview was seen so many times? Like, can we take the good with the bad, or
my answer is yes.
I would say there's an additional bad you're not mentioning. Yes, it was good he got the exposure. The additional bad that's not being mentioned is there's a lot of black nationalist, socialist, communist organizations that, I mean, not a super a lot. I mean, it's more black nationalists, which have been revolutionary fervor in the United States for a long time, that have said we're ambivalent to Russia. We want diplomacy with Russia. But they get FBI warrants against them. They're brutally suppressed. They're killed. Socialists and civil rights people going up the Capitol, like in January 6th, they would have been killed before they got in the steps. So I'm saying is it is beneficial that they only allow the most racist, vile, disgusting, divisive figures to be the talk piece for diplomacy, because then it enforces Russiagate and then brands that positive position with the most destructive position to our movement here in the United States, which is class struggle. And class struggle absolutely needs anti-racism, or it's almost impossible, because the poorest the poor in the United States are black and brown people, are the recent immigrants. And if you look at the Communist Party, in the communist parties in the 30s and the 40s, the reason why they were so powerful is because they were able to recognize the national question, organize black and white together, and the majority of the members of the Communist Party were recent immigrants from Eastern Europe. So I mean, these figures are dangerous, and they're branding a positive position with probably the most destructive and worst obstacle to building socialism in the United States, which is anti-immigrant bigotry and racism.
I'll say the biggest Russophile I ever met, actually, was when I was taking a Russian language class in Moscow last year. And there was this black guy from Los Angeles, this big black dude. He was the most stereotypical black dude from Los Angeles you could imagine, with the dreadlocks and everything. And he was just like the most hardcore Russophile I've ever met. He was just like, yeah, you know, LA, Los Angeles is a shithole. He would just say it. Los Angeles is a shithole. Moscow is amazing. Russia is amazing. He was just a hardcore Russophile. So, and the reason Russians, I would say, I think half the reason Russians like Tucker Carlson is not even that they like it. It's just he's a very stereotypical American. Like when a Russian person imagines an American, they think of Tucker Carlson. That's just the face. He's a very it's what they all tell me. And so when this American guy goes to Moscow, goes to Yakutsny, Tachka, goes to the metro and all this, they love it. It's great. So if a black nationalist type guy or even just a black dude in general, like if Muhammad Ali went to Moscow. I mean, if a black celebrity wants to go to Moscow, they will welcome him with open arms, and they will be fascinated. This African American guy is in Moscow, and they'll be just as fascinated.
I'm not saying that the stereotype is true. I'm saying allowing him to be the face makes it more believable. Even
allowing him, he
it's
tried to make.
But there's a huge history.
If they want to, they can't.
He tried to create the circumstances for this interview for 2 years, and they did everything to try to stop him. Come on.
They wouldn't.
Well,
they didn't. Did they stop him? Did they stop him? No. They have stopped everybody else who has tried to do it or anything else.
Because their answer is always JFK.
The Uhuru movement. They interviewed an ambassador and they got FBI charges. Trump is not facing the same repression that socialists and revolutionary nationalists in the United States are facing.
The Uhuru movement, while I support them, they didn't get the visibility that Tucker already had before this interview. There is not just someone they can shoot on
they're the last. They're the last of the entire Black Power movement. The the Black Power movement was murdered. And the Uhuru is like the last bit of it from the 70s that became very insular and basically stayed within their community. So they're definitely not going to have the reach Tucker's call. So so you're basically just furthering my argument that they're allowing people.
My argument is he's not so easily stopped. You can't just shoot him publicly somewhere like they did with Fred Hampton. You know,
I think they could. They could.
Same goes for Trump.
Yeah, I got you. I wanted to echo Comrade Ian's statement about, if you look at the history of the South and the Black Belt South, people that were sharecroppers were being given free trips to the Soviet Union to study in the best universities in the world. Harry Haywood, who came up with the national question, applying Marxism-Leninism to the South, was actually a member of the committee of the Bolshevik, one of the main Bolshevik committees. So the history between Russia, the Soviet Union, and the Afro-American population or Black population is, and you look at Paul Robeson, who went over there and said, "I feel like a full man when I went to the Soviet Union."
He celebrated? Yes.
Yeah. So when I said that the media is trying to twist this, I didn't say it was a reality. I'm saying them having Tucker Carlson helps promote the lie. that they've been promoting, which is Russiagate, which is if you support Putin, you're supporting Trump's racism. And I've been doing organizing independent Black figures who have come to me and told me that. And it's a very big obstacle to try to organize and overcome. And I think figures like Trump and Tucker Carlson being the face of this diplomacy with Russia just makes that job even harder to do.
I hear where you're coming from.
So the article that I read this morning on Tucker at Mint Press was suggesting that he's like a limited hangout. That's they didn't use that term, but I use that term to describe him, and also a safety valve, I think, something like that. So he's allowing an expression in a confined, safe way. Like letting off.
I'm sorry, I lost the context. We're talking about Tucker still, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So wait. Okay.
So the reason that they allowed, this to happen, because they did ultimately allow it. They didn't physically stop him. They didn't threaten him with prison. The reason they did that was because, a limited hangout, and kind of like Dust James was saying, to tie pro-Russian sentiment to white nationalist sentiment and Trump, and to put all those things in a box together, like package them as a whole package deal. If you're part of this, then you like this, then you like this. And that's kind of how they do it, to frame people and manipulate people into taking certain positions that are, liberal positions or not liberal positions. But ultimately, it's got to be a beneficial thing. I mean, even if it's a limited hangout, even if it's an allowed safety valve, like to allow Putin for 2 hours to make his case, and to be eminently statesmanlike and logical and sane and rational, and to have probably over 1 billion people view it, is, I think, a net positive. And so,
yeah. So
I agree. I just added additional negative
to
the point you brought up.
Well, here's the reality. So I went to Moscow the first time in winter of 2021 before shit hit the fan, and then I came back. I think it was June of 2022. I came back. I got all kinds of shit for that. I mean, people were hysterical that I was going back to Russia at that time period. So at the end of the day, anybody can apply for a goddamn visa and go to Russia. Nothing is stopping them except themselves and their own Russophobia. So there's just freaking go. If a Black community, and I'm sorry, I have seen Black community members. I've seen these big spokespeople on social media talking. They're usually anti-Russia. I say, hey, go to Russia. Muhammad Ali did it. Huey Newton, founder of the Black Panthers, was a big Soviet Union advocate. Go and see Russia for yourself. It's like, oh, no, it's bad. So, if the African-American community wants to see Russia for themselves and be pro-Russia, they can. There is no one stopping them except themselves.
Poverty, media.
They're limited
of course.
financially.
Limited financial.
I mean, they control working class and oppressed populations. They control our media.
True.
We have limited resources to travel. But that's not the masses of the population.
On the broader point, though, that Ian made, I like to paraphrase. I think Dmitry Orlov did an interview with a soft-spoken Brazilian guy. What do you call it? Dialogue Works. I think he's called not Dima, but something like that. Anyway, and he said when the Russians go to a foreign place, they just go native. There is no such thing as white supremacy in the Russian culture. Never was. They never were like a colonial force, which is why there's enormous amounts of goodwill to them in Latin America, in Africa, and to a great extent in Eastern Europe, except for our leadership. There still is. So I thought that was the major point. Yeah, if you don't believe it, go check out Russia. If you have the means, I understand thus that not everybody does.
That's very true about Russians. They absolutely go native, whether it's the USA or some Western European country or Latin America. They do go native, and they don't impose Russian values. I'll say that's an unfortunate thing about Americans. We do have a tendency to, even if we're consciously trying not to, we do kind of impose that. Russians don't.
Honestly, one of the biggest things I've been able to bring up and use as a point isn't trying to defend Russia, because I think there is like, oh, that's a white country. There's this confusion. That's a white country. They're just like those white people. And the liberals manipulate that to do that when it's completely
They do that with Poland. There's plenty of black people in Russia.
But I think another thing, a huge thing I've been able to bring up is look at the outright, blatant white supremacy of the Nazis in Ukraine. Look at the way they treated the black students. Look at how they treat U.S. soldiers who go to train them. They call monkeys and they call disgusting things. Like that's been a wonderful thing I've been able to bring up as far as in this propaganda war against this.
Fair point.
And certainly Africa feels like they owe a great debt of gratitude to the former Soviet Union and by extension Russia, because Soviet Union stood up against U.S. and European imperialism all over the continent in many different ways, and so that still lingers. I think that's in the minds of the leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger right now. So,
Yeah, a new federation they're forming there with the
yeah,
French kicked
and
out.
certainly South Africa and Angola, for example.
And even up into
Zimbabwe, all across.
Up into the UAE. It wasn't the UAE that gave that really great a welcome to Putin with the jets and the tricolored exhaust. Wasn't that? I think that was the UAE.
I think you're right. That was the UAE.
Gave a hero's welcome. So we've been going. My other phone's ringing. I apologize. Dust, thank you for joining us. I don't want to rush everybody off. It's over an hour and a half. You were with us for a good part of. I know you were busy, so I just thank you for doing your job and joining our roundtable and contributing to the discussion. I really appreciate it. My stupid phone keeps ringing. Does anybody else want to say any other topics before we sign off?
Quick concluding points. It's very important days, not just the 10-year anniversary of Euromaidan, but also the final trial the extradition of Assange is going on in the UK, and apparently he's not showed up because he's unwell, so we will see where that goes. Also, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, is hearing from something like 30 or 40 countries about the illegality of Israel's occupation. So that's something to pay attention to, I think, after this program. And just a final thought, I'd like to not shout out to Lula because I don't know the man, but he was the guy who got on the bad side of Israel. He is not fucking ashamed of it. And it was brilliant. Basically, he compared the Nazi Holocaust to what they're doing in Gaza, very rightly so. And Israelis said, "You're persona non grata in our land until you apologize." He said, "Fuck you, I'm bringing back my ambassador." It's not the same as severing all diplomatic relations, but he did a big step. And I already saw Evo Morales of Bolivia saying it's an honor to be persona non grata in Israel. So those were my things that we always forget or leave out. I wanted to make sure they're in.
Now, is this breaking news that Shanique was sharing with us, or?
Maybe.
No, it isn't. That was one ceasefire at the UN, and I think that was brought by Algeria. But most of the news is they want to bring their own ceasefire to stop the Rafah massacre.
That's what I heard. That the U.S. was threatening to bring to the UN Security Council their own ceasefire resolution, which seemed interesting. I mean, it would be about time.
Yeah, Shanika can correct me, but I think this was the Algerian, draft resolution that the US vetoed. The third fucking time they vetoed a ceasefire. Also, shout out to the Houthis. Thank you guys
so much. Okay. We had a pretty good live audience as far as numbers go. So I appreciate everybody for watching. We will be back on Friday. We'll see you then. Thank you very much.